Hey, can you hear me?
I hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. So I was listening to one of your sermons on YouTube. I think it was Living Waters, and it was so good. And I really resonated with the very end of it where you were talking about God giving you a promise toward ministry and Him stripping you away of that, where you had this whole Isaac, I guess you would say, moment. And with that, I was wondering, this is hard to kind of say. But I was wondering if how do you know the difference between in a promise? Because faith is something I just learned. Like I literally just learned it in like 2021 from Michael Todd. How do you know if a promise is, I guess you would say, if a promise is dead, like the Israelites, where it's dead and gone and God's done with you, or if you're having an Isaac moment where you have to relinquish something?
That's a very good question.
Mhm,
So if I understand the question, how do you know if you have a promise that's just like it's expired
mhm,
or if you just have to give something up?
right.
Um, Many times you won't really know. But I
Mhm,
will say this, if you are alive, the promises of God are not dead.
mhm,
The only time I would say that you'll know if God's like moved on is if you rejected him completely, you
mhm,
know. But it's not that easy to just get rid of the promise that God has over you. We
mhm,
can delay it, that's possible. Um, but I wouldn't even worry so much about if the promise is dead, because that would mean that God would not be faithful to keep his promise.
mhm.
So I wouldn't even worry about that.
Okay.
Um, how do I know if it's something that I need to give up? Then I would pay attention to what God is saying and what God is speaking into my heart. If there is something that He's been asking and I'm struggling with, then that means there is some sort of Isaac that He wants you to lay down. One thing I will say about God, for Him to give you the promise that He has for you, He
Mhm,
will always ask you for something that it is uncomfortable for you to do and
mhm,
uncomfortable for you to give up. Always. So there's always going to be an Isaac situation at
mhm,
some sort of point.
mhm,
So I would say forget about whether it's dead, because God will always going to keep his promise, and
mhm.
100% God wants an Isaac always.